I put this program together for our neighborhood potluck party right before Memorial Day because I wanted to do something patriotic at our potluck. So I put this together, and then I thought, oh, how appropriate, since tomorrow's the 4th of July, this would be extremely appropriate for this meeting as well. So first, I'm going to, a little bit more than just the history of the flag. That's what the agenda said. I'm sorry, it's a little bit more than that. We're going to talk about the patriotic holidays that we have, patriotic songs and poems, and then the flags of the United States. So there's a lot there. First of all, let's talk about the holidays. The military branch. Did you realize that the first actual military in the United States was the National Guard in the 1630s? It's presumably the colonists getting together to band together to protect themselves from the Native Americans, maybe. The interesting thing is these didn't last. They came and went depending on what the need of that. But the first permanent branch of the military is the Army. Yeah. Happy birthday. 1775, 250. And then followed by the Navy later that year. And then the Marines later that year. When I was putting this together, I was in my office putting it together, and I all of a sudden I realized, holy crap, it's 250 years. I yelled at my wife, I was like, did you know there was 250 years? And then came the Coast Guard in 1790, followed by the Air Force in 1947, and then finally the Space Force in 2019. So let's talk about Flag Day. It celebrates the adoption of the flag, makes sense, in 1777. Several states already acknowledged the adoption of the flag. Presidents Wilson and Coolidge finally, by executive order, made it a holiday, and in 1949 it became an official holiday. President's Day, on the other hand, in 1800 was actually the celebration of George Washington's birthday, and it was a day of remembrance. Back then, he was even more of a god than he is now to the people there. He was extremely important to them. In 1879, it became a federal holiday. And then in 1968, there was this wonderful thing called the Uniform Monday Holiday Act. And that moved a bunch of our holidays to Monday so that we would have a 3-day weekend. Now, the reason they did this in 1968 was retail sales were slipping in the late 60s, and they thought that if we made 3-day weekends, we might boost retail sales. Did it work? Mattress Firm's President's Day sale. Yes, it worked. But the 4 presidents that were actually born in February, due to the actual days of their birthday, they will never fall on President's Day because it's meant to celebrate all of the presidents. Armed Forces Day. It started in 1949. President Truman wanted to illustrate that the military was for more than just fighting wars. We just came out of this horrific war, WW2, and it replaced all of the individual days. Now, I know that if you're a Marine, you still celebrate your day, but this one celebrates all of the branches. And it was designed to educate the public of what the extended military mission was there for. It honors men and women who are currently serving in the military. It's the 3rd Saturday in May, and this year it was May 17th. Our servicemen and women are serving throughout the world as guardians of peace, many of them away from their homes, their friends, and their families. They are visible evidence of our determination to meet any threat to peace with measured strength and high resolve. They are evidence of a harsh but inescapable truth that the survival of freedom requires a great cost, commitment, and great personal sacrifice. President Kennedy. Memorial Day, on the other hand, it started out as Decoration Day right after the Civil War. By the way, the Civil War is our costliest war as far as human lives are concerned. 620,000 lives lost. The family members, after the war was over, were going to the graves and decorating the graves, and it was called Decoration Day, and it was May 30th. It also marks the unofficial beginning of the summer, but Unified Holiday Bill in 1968 moved it to a Monday in May. President Clinton, by executive order, asked that at 3 o'clock on Memorial Day, you have a moment of silence. It honors all of those who died while serving. Now, that's the intent of it. However, in reality, we decorate all of the graves. This is my brother and my nephew putting flowers on my dad's grave. My dad was a chief in the Navy, served on the Kitty Hawk off the coast of Korea during that war and off the coast of Vietnam during that war. Our debt to heroic men and valiant women in the service of the country can never be repaid. They have earned our undying gratitude, and America will never forget their sacrifices. Very Strand. 4th of July. Now, this one may be obvious. However, could it be also July 2nd? The Continental Congress met on July 2nd, and they actually voted on that day to declare independence. That night, John Adams went home, wrote Abigail, his wife, a letter that says, July 2nd will always be known as the birth date of freedom in the world. They came back on July 4th and signed the Declaration of Independence, and so that's the day that we recognize. A year later, in Philadelphia, there were 13 rockets and 13 gun salute in celebration of the day. And at night there was a grand exhibition of fireworks on the Commons, and the city was beautifully illuminated. So the first fireworks show in regards to the 4th of July was in 1777, 1 year after. In 1870, it became a federal holiday. In 41, it became a paid holiday. Veterans Day. On November 11th, 1918, was the official end of World War I. A year later, Wilson, by executive order, created an Armistice Day to remember the day that we finally got peace. In 1938, it became a national holiday. Well, we know what happened a couple of years later. World War II started. So after that war, they changed it to Veterans Day. Oh, there's our old buddy, the Uniform Holiday Act. It moved it to a Monday in November. However, out of all of the holidays that bill screwed with, I would say, that's the only one that had a specific day that it was actually referencing. It was Armistice Day. So in 1975, we moved it back to November 11th. Veterans know better than anyone the price of freedom, for they have suffered the scars of war. We can offer them no better tribute than to protect what they have won for us. All right, pledges and our songs. The Pledge of Allegiance. In 1892, Francis Bellamy, who was a school teacher in New England, wrote a generic pledge to a flag. It didn't reference the United States. It was a generic pledge to the flag. He was a socialist, by the way. And it literally said, instead of to the United States, it said to my flag. So any person in any country could use this pledge for their own flag. But in 1923, by executive order, it was edited to add the words, the flag of the United States. Now in 1945, the salute changed. And I want to show you, it's a visual, how it changed. Because when we say the Pledge of Allegiance, we put our hand over our heart, right? Yeah. And we say the pledge. When Bellamy wrote this, this is how it was. I pledge allegiance to my flag, blobbity, blobbity, blobbity. So what happened in 1940s would make this wholly inappropriate. So we changed it to where it's literally, you put your hand over your heart for the whole pledge. And in 1954, with the rising atheistic communism, they added the words, under God. Now, we all know about the Star-Spangled Banner, where it came, Francis Scott Key watching the battle over Fort McHenry. His brother-in-law actually set it to music. It was a poem. He wrote a poem. He didn't write a song, he wrote a poem. It was 4 verses. His brother-in-law set it to music. And in 1916, President William, by executive order, made it the unofficial national anthem. in the late 20s and early 30s, there was a great push to try to not make it the national anthem. And that's because the melody used was from a questionable drinking song. Worse than that, as you all know, because we sang it just a little while ago, it's not the easiest song to sing. You know, especially the Rockets' Red Glare. I just typically just move my lips to that one because I can't hit that. So the melody was hard to sing and it's hard to dance to. I don't know anybody that dances to the Pledge of Allegiance, but these were the reasons that given that they wanted to change it. America the Beautiful, on the other hand, was written by a lady named Kathleen Bates, not Kathy Bates, Kathleen Bates. She was a school teacher in Ohio, and she was asked to speak in Colorado Springs. So she got on the train in Ohio and took the train all the way across the United States to Colorado. When she got to Colorado, she took a trip to the top of Pikes Peak, and when she was at the top of the Pikes Peak, all of the things that she had been seeing across the United States, the fruited plains, the amber waves of grain, the purple mountain majesties, she wrote the poem, America the Beautiful. An Episcopalian music director actually put it to music, and America the Beautiful is in most hymnals and most Christian churches now. There was a big push to make it the national anthem, but it just didn't stick. If you've ever heard Ray Charles sing America the Beautiful, in my opinion, it's one of the best renditions of it. If you go onto YouTube and put America Beautiful Ray Charles, there's not only is a beautiful his song is beautiful, but there's also a slide collage of pictures of the United States. God Bless America, on the other hand, in 1918, Irving Berlin wrote it. Again, it was a poem. And he wrote it because he was literally in love with living in the United States. He loved his country. And so he wrote this poem about how wonderful it was to live in the United States. But then he threw it in the trunk in his attic and forgot all about it until 1938 when Kate Smith said, I got this new television, this new radio program, and I need a unique, powerful song for it. So he thought a little while, he went back up to the attic, got the lyric out of the trunk in the attic, he updated it, put it to music, and that's what Kate Smith sang on the radio. It became her signature song for over 5 decades. And it was meant to unite the country. See that in 1938, we were getting ready to ramp up for another war, and I think everybody knew that. And so it was just a way to help unite the country. All proceeds the two of them got for it went to the Girl Scouts and the Boy Scouts. And these are all the other hymns that are considered patriotic songs. My music teacher taught us all that. I bet that half the kids don't even know what these songs are anymore. It's too bad. Now let's talk about Old Glory, the actual reason why you're here. So how many stars do you think that the first flag had on it? It was a trick question. It didn't have any. This is the first flag. Actually, John Paul Jones hoisted this flag on the Alfred, which was his flagship of the fleet. And also, Pennsylvania militia took this into battle. It was one of the first. It was the first flag that we had. As a side note, my great-great-great-grandfather was in the Pennsylvania militia. Now, I don't know whether or not he fought behind this flag, but they did carry it. Now, keep that in the back of your mind, Pennsylvania militia, unusual-looking flag. The first Flag Act in 1777 resolved that the flag of the United States should be made of 13 stripes, alternating red and white, the union be of 13 stars, white and a blue field representing a new constellation. Makes sense. Why red, white, and blue? Red represents valor and bravery, white purity and innocence, and blue vigilance, perseverance, and justice. So they do have a reason behind it. So this is presumably what most of us think of as the first flag. It was adopted by Congress on June 14th, remember, Flag Day, of 1777. Its nickname is the Betsy Ross flag. That we grew up learning about Betsy Ross. I'm going to burst your bubble about Betsy Ross now. The story goes that George Washington and two other members of the Second Continental Congress, the so-called Flag Committee, went to Betsy Ross, who owned an upholstery store in Philadelphia. And they said, "This is what we want for our flag, can you do it?" And she looked at it and she said, "Yes, but I'd like to make the stars 5 points because I can cut them out easier than I can cut out a 6-point star." And they said, "Fine, whatever." And so that was it. She told that story to her kids, and her kids told their kids. And in the 1870s, the grandkids of Betsy Ross went to the federal government and said, "Guess what? Our grandmother was the original person who sewed the flag, and it stuck." Here's the problem with it. First of all, there's no record that in the Second Continental Congress that there was ever anything called a flag committee. Second of all, if you look at the date, if you look at the date, George Washington was not at the Second Continental Congress. He was a member of the Second Continental Congress, but he was out fighting a war. So there's the two rubs with the theory of the Betsy Ross. The only supporting evidence is that there's an invoice that they found that Betsy Ross invoiced the Pennsylvania militia for making a flag. Quite possibly that old flag that I showed you at the very beginning. I like the Betsy Ross flag, or Betsy Ross story, I just don't know whether it's true. This is what the first flag actually looked like. It had the 13 stars in this arrangement. Now, if you were in the 1700s and even in the 1800s and you wanted a flag, you didn't go to flags.us or .com, you didn't go to Lowe's, you had to make it. So you went to the store, or what you call the place where you buy material, but you buy the red, white, and blue material and you'd make it yourself. Interestingly, the description from the first Flag Act did not say anything about how the stars should be arranged. It talks about the stripes, but it doesn't talk about the stars. So you could put them in any place you want in the blue. This is an actual flag from the 1700s, and that tradition went all the way through the 1800s. There was no regulation about how the stars were to be arranged. The second Flag Act came along in 1794, and the reason they had to do another one is because Vermont and Kentucky came on, so now we have 15 states. And the flag, I'm not going to go through all the additions. You're going to, oh my God, we're going to go through every one of them. No, we're not. The reason this one's important because it says it shall have 15 stripes and 15 stars. So not only did we add 2 stars for Vermont and Kentucky, but we also added 2 stripes to it. So it looks like this. Yeah, it still looks okay. Getting a little busy. The most famous 15-striped flag is the Star-Spangled Banner, the one that Francis Scott Key saw. If you look at it, it actually has the 15 stripes in it. By and by, these holes and these right here were not due to the battle. After the battle was over, the commander of the garrison that was at the fort realized that this flag was something special, so he took it home, and it stayed in his family for about 2 generations. And every time a family member would come over, they would cut a piece of it out and give it as a souvenir. There were upwards of 20 pieces cut out of it. You can actually see one of them cut out one of the stars right there. Now it's in the Smithsonian. I'm sure a lot of you have seen it. It's the most treasured flag in the United States. And the Smithsonian has managed to recover 7 of those pieces of the flag. Instead of putting them back in, they use it to test different ways of preserving the flag. So instead of putting a new idea and ruining the whole flag, they use the little pieces to test new ways of preserving the flag. And then the Flag Act of 1818, we got more states came on board. Now we're up to 20, and they got to thinking, holy crap, if we keep adding stripes, we're going to end up like this lady's shirt right here. It's going to be nothing but pinstripes, right? So we go back to 13 horizontal stripes, and then we'll add a star for each one of them. The other important thing in this one is we add a star on the 4th of July following the admission of the state. There's 27 versions of the flag from the original 13 to the one we have now. And that's the reason there's not more of them. Because the state comes in November, they have to wait all the way around until the following 4th of July before we have the star is added for them. So this is what it ended up looking like. We go back to the 13. This is 1851, we're adding more stars, oh boy, adding more. And then in 1912 with an executive order, I keep saying executive order because nowadays the words executive order almost get a bad taste in people's mouth. There's a lot of good executive orders. So by executive order in 1912, President Taft said that the stars should be arranged this way, in a particular way. Let's just not keep haphazardly sewing them on the flag. They should be arranged in a certain way. So that's what it looked like with the 48 stars that they had in 1912. And then this is what we have now after Alaska and Hawaii. So that version of the flag came around in July 4th, 1960, making it 65 years. This is the longest version of a flag that we had, and it probably will be for a continued long time. Now, why Old Glory? There was a captain in 1824 named William Driver. He was captain of the Charles Dragon. He got the captainship of this ship, and so his wife and his daughter made him a flag to fly that was 10 foot by 17 foot. And at the 1824, there were only 24 states, so there were 24 stars. So he flew it on this ship, and he was said to have said, "My ship, my country, my flag, my Old Glory." He sailed under that flag to China, India, Gibraltar, South Pacific. He even picked up some survivors from the HMS Bounty. He said, "Savages and heathens, lowly and oppressed, hailed and welcomed the far end of the wide world. Then why should it not be called Old Glory?" So he retires and moves to Nashville, where he proudly displays his flag now in front of his house, until 1860, when Tennessee seceded from the Union. He still flew the flag, but he got a visit from the rebels and said, "You need to take the flag down." And he said, "No, I'm not going to do that." They came back second time. "You need to take the flag down." "I'm not going to do that." They came back a third time, and he said, "The only way I'm taking that flag down is over my dead body." After they left, his wife said, "How many more times are they going to come before they take you up on that?" So they took the flag down, and she sewed it in a coverlet and put it on the back of the couch. And that's where it stayed until the Union troops took Nashville. When the Union Army was marching in, they took the coverlet out and gave it to the general of the army and said, "Tennessee is yours." 1912, it got into the Smithsonian Institute, and there it is. It's the second most prized flag behind the Star-Spangled Banner. Thank you. That's it. There's your history of the flag.